Hi, welcome to Funky Rainbow this royal Saturday morning. So lovely to be back with a bazaar again. We had to take a break for a week, and it was our inventory and stock taking going on at Funky Rainbow. Nothing short of a royal pain, if I may say so. Lovely to see you here this morning. Muttama Devaya always saying that you're the most regal person at our office, and we truly miss having you here and hoping that you'll be back here very, very soon. Joanne Saldana, delighted to see you. It's great to be back for our usual Saturday morning adda, this time a royal one. So delighted to see you here this morning. As also Moon Mitra Das, all the way from Calcutta. So lovely that you have joined us at the bazaar this morning. Muttama saying, well, you're looking royal yourself in that blue, purple, the color of royalty. I love the poster that Shams designed for the bazaar, with that lovely purple background. Of course, the royalty, kings and queens, and the royalty has been in the news all of the week that's gone by. We know, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, passed away at 99, and you know, I'm not sure, how much that the royalty means to us really, but many years ago when I visited London, one of the things on the list was to definitely to go to see the Queen, or at least go to see Buckingham Palace. There has been that kind of fascination that we have with royalty in India and abroad. The thing is, there have been so many photos that the royal family has shared in the last week or so of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. And I know many of us have been looking at it, which always makes me wonder, what is this fascination with royalty? Why do we all have such a huge fascination with royalty? And I'm hoping in the course of this bazaar, the answers to that question might get clear. I mean, children's books as well, forever focusing on stories of princes and princesses, kings and queens. It really makes me wonder. And one of the reasons we put together this bazaar is, of course, because the whole week was a buzz with talk of the royalty in different, with just so many photos being shared of Princess Diana, Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth. Really, so we said, well, time to turn the spotlight on mostly Indian kings and queens, mostly Indian queens and kings. In fact, we have so many more queens with just a smattering of kings thrown into our bazaar today. I mean, these stories, I think the reason is because, the building of empires, Harshika Udasi saying, hello, happy to be here and ready to pocket some royalty. How lovely that sounds, really. We have royalty to suit every pocket, Harshika Udasi. And I'm so glad to see you here this morning. The thing is, the building of empires, the palace intrigues, the unbelievable acts of courage and loyalty, great champions of the arts, queens and kings have really captured our imaginations, whether it is in a picture book or in a book for middle readers, in a young adult book, or even in books for adults. And hence today we have this wide range of books, straddling all genres, with featuring queens and kings, real and imagined, that we'd like to introduce to all of you. Of course, the reason that we choose to focus on queens, and many of you know that our guest for the day, who's going to join us half an hour, 45 minutes into the show today, has this fabulous queens series. But the reason that we also want to focus on queens in history is that really we believe that women and girls from yesterday can really inspire us today. If you choose the right role models, choose to tell the right stories, and we know, and I'm sure our guest of the day, Devika Rangachari, will certainly talk about it, to all of us, about how history, when it's conveniently written from one perspective, or rather mostly from a man's perspective, has tended to leave women out of it. What we want to do in the course of this bazaar, and I mean, it's just a small effort to set some wrongs right, is to really put women back in the picture. And we've got a whole host of books featuring queens and princesses with a smattering of kings thrown in. As always, all the books in our Queens and Kings Bazaar, up on our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. Please click the tab that says Bazaar, and the first, drop-down item will be Queens and Kings. Several books, up there, featuring, royalty, fictional and, real royalty in these books, meant for children from the ages of 0 to 18 years. I can see Divya Menon, Avyukt, and Ameya Nair, there, and saying good morning to all, full Khandan watching eagerly. We welcome our first Khandan with a great deal of love and affection. I know you said and messaged us saying there were great demands for popcorn and lemonade. Parcel service always welcome at Funky Rainbow, so you can send the lemonade and popcorn over as well. Joanne Saldana saying historical fiction is my favorite genre. I'm looking forward to picking up some of these treasures. We can't thank you enough for that support, Joanne. Not today, but every single day across the last so many years. To all our friends on Instagram, good morning. I'm delighted that you join us, to watch the Book Bazaar on Instagram. But our guest of the day comes up at 12 noon, and we're not able to stream that conversation on Instagram at the moment. So if you are on Facebook or on YouTube, you can check out the Funky Rainbow Facebook page or the YouTube, channel, and watch the conversation there, because our guest today has some fascinating books of historical fiction to her credit, and has researched women in history so compulsively, so rivetingly, that is a conversation that I'm very sure all of you will enjoy. Divya Menon saying, you guys deserve much, much more than popcorn. Yes, popcorn and lemonade is the demand at Funky Rainbow at the moment. But yes, like I said, we aim through this bazaar to put really women back in the picture. And, I'm going to start off with we're not leaving the kings out. Don't think that, there are no lovely kings. There are lots of kings in historical fiction and in our stories and in our histories, but really the spotlight more on queens today than on kings. However, lots of books up in the bazaar link, in the Queens and Kings Bazaar link, and you will find kings and queens rubbing shoulders with each other there. My first recommendation for the day is a lovely little book from Pratham that I absolutely enjoy reading every time I read it, called The Weightlifting Princess, written by Soumya Rajendran and illustrated by Debasmita Das Gupta. What a lovely, charming story this is. I mean, telling a tale so simply, so charmingly, yet defying so many stereotypes in one simple picture book. Well, this is the story of Princess Nila, who is so eager to win the Surya Championship, which is the weightlifting contest in her kingdom. And what is she doing? What does Princess Nila do? She's training. She trains, and she wants to make sure the contest is just a month away, and she needs to get to weigh 55 kilos while she's only 53 kilos, and she needs to put on those 2 kilos in order to compete in the weightlifting competition. And here you can see Debasmita Das Gupta's charming, colorful illustrations, really, of how even as a child, Princess Nila loved to lift things. And, so much humor worked into the pages through the illustration as well. I mean, lifting dogs, lifting chairs, lifting tables, lifting cupboards, and even lifting the king. Soumya Rajendran being a great champion of gender equality and women's rights. Every word of every page of the book, either through text or illustration, trying to break many, many stereotypes that have, sort of that have just steeped themselves into most of our consciousnesses, and we need to break them. We need to get away from them. Does Princess Nila have some problems? Well, not in the least. There's a handsome prince in the picture, as well as the weight of her parents' expectations. But that said, you have to read this charming, wonderful book to find out if Princess Nila actually wins the Surya championship. This one we would recommend for 6+ year olds, but maybe if you're reading it to younger readers, you can even read it out to a younger child. This one priced at 40 rupees and published by Pratham. The thing with these, the books that we've put out in the bazaar, I mean, we have a discount voucher. Once you log on to our website, please do use that discount voucher when you're picking books, when you're buying books off our website. They're all available at special discounted prices for all of you who watch our bazaar. Our next book is two books, in fact, written by a very, very dear friend and a great supporter of Funky Rainbow, Asha Nehmaya, with her charming the Raja's mustache. A lovely story about a king from the Raja Muchacho Singh of Mushipur, who had a really fine mustache. It was thick, black, and curled up at the tips. You can see, I'm sure many, many of you have read this book. I know many children who've grown up across the last decade or two enjoying this wonderful book by Asha Nehmaya and illustrated by B.G. Varma. Now, of course, Raja Muchacho Singh, so proud of his mustache, sort of combing it every day and letting it curl up so regally, so royally, the twirly, whirly, curly mustache. I can see Haripriya Batula saying, twirly, whirly, curly mustache. Indeed, the stuff of the finest fiction is that twirly, whirly, curly mustache. Joanne Saldana saying, it's one of my absolute favorites. We have such fun with this book. I just can't imagine anyone not having fun. And Asha, being the fabulous, humorist that she is, the king who loved his curly, twirly mustache, mustache so much, decided that everything in the kingdom had to be shaped much like his mustache. And you can see those little, those trees and plants, the horse's tail. My God, this book has chuckles aplenty and features Raja Muchacho Singh. Of course, with this, we have one more book that we launched at the bazaar, written by Asha Nehmaya herself, called The Grand Chapati Contest. And the reason we have this book in our bazaar is we simply love the queen of the Grand Chapati Contest so very much. Well, what is it? It's about a story. I mean, it's about a king who absolutely wants to eat the perfect chapati. But the chief chapati cook, absolutely decides to, renounce the kingdom and go away. Now, of course, the queen, whom we just love in this book, is not going to make the chapatis herself, really. She's busy. She's busy with all kinds of things. She's busy with repairing the big clock in the high tower. She's busy fixing designing a new fountain for the garden. And what we love about this spunky queen is that she had no intention of ever making a chapati. And you can see her in these overalls, absolutely getting about the work that she knows how to do best. So there is, of course, and Harshika Udasi saying that I love the Queen's attire. Absolutely, such a lovely, such a lovely story it is. Again, chuckles aplenty thanks to Asha's wonderful sense of humor. Muttama saying, what a fabulous launch that was, with Aaron's video and with Avyuk grilling our guests for that on at that launch, Asha Nehemiah and CG Salamander. So, of course, the Grand Chapati contest, which features quite a lovely queen, priced at 175 rupees, published by Duckbill. This one we'd recommend for 5+ year olds, and the Raja's Mustache too, both by one of our most favorite people on the planet, Asha Nehemiah. Shubeske, good morning. We love this book, and we are a big fan of Asha Nehemiah. I can't imagine anyone not being a huge fan of this delightful writer. Our next recommendation for this morning is a story that comes from far off Arunachal Pradesh. This is The Sky Queen, written by Mamang Dai and illustrated by Shrivi. What is it? What is this lovely book all about? Well, it's all about a queen who lives in the skies, and how the clouds form her silken robes, how the rivers and the streams are her sweat and tears, and how her voice rings out in the sweetest, her voice sort of puts out the sweetest of songs for all the birds and insects. She is, of course, Nyani Nyani of the lovely kingdom of Kojam Koja. It's a beautiful story, as always, from the Northeast. And, there's so much of folklore, so much of legend, so much of mythology that comes into, stories from the Northeast. What is the Sky Queen up to? Is she all about living one with nature? You have to read this wonderful book, full of names, full of references to the Northeast. We know Mamang Dai is one of the finest writers from the Northeast, and we're absolutely delighted that there is this lovely book actually about the ever-changing the ever-changing seasons and the ever-changing ways of the natural world. And what does the Sky Queen do to control that? Is she the one who makes those seasons possible? What a beautiful book, for the youngest of readers, published by Katha. And like I said, really nice, bright, and very, arty illustrations done by Shrivi. This one published by Katha. Again, we'd recommend for, 6+ year olds, priced at 120 rupees and published by Katha. Our next recommendation this morning is a book by an artist who I discovered only when, by looking at the books from Funky Rainbow. Haripriya Batula saying, brilliant retelling of the folk tale. The book gives a wonderful glimpse into the folklore from Arunachal Pradesh. That's so right. I mean, interweaving myths, legends, tradition, folklore into a simple, lovely story of the Sky Queen and her ever-changing natural world. This one, like I said, is an artist that I encountered for the first time only by looking at the big, wide range of books that we have at Funky Rainbow, Meli Gobai. And it's really, his artistic style. And I know we had a beautiful, a book on the tree, I'm afraid, on trees. And I'm afraid that book is not in print with the publisher at the moment, which was also done by Meli Gobai. Good morning, Ramendra Kumar. How lovely to see you at the bazaar. The Sky Queen is ageless. Indeed, she is. It's a fantastic book, and I think it's probably been in print for very, very many years now. Joanne saying, love Meli Gobai's old world charm in this one, and Lakshmi the buffalo, just absolutely stunning. Yes, you're right. I mean, the illustrations in this book, The Legend of the Orange Princess, just takes your breath away. It's very old school. It's very old. It has a lot of old world charm, like Joanne just said. But what is the story all about? Well, it's set, there's great excitement in the palace of Chandpur, where a princess was born. But you know what, she's born, the king's eagerly looking to greet the latest family member. But when he goes to visit the queen, and I'm going to show you that image or an illustration, when he goes to visit the queen, who's just delivered a baby, they realize that what she's delivered is an orange. Orange or not, the king and the queen decide that that is their princess. And the legend that follows subsequently is so charming. So the orange is in attendance at court. The orange goes here, there, everywhere with the queen and the king. And yes, every night at a secret time emerges, there's somebody that emerges from that orange. Of course, it is the orange princess. And I just love the way she's named. She's called Narangi. And you can see, what Joanne meant by the old world charm of these illustrations, classic old school illustrations that really, keep you turning the pages and keep you looking at the picture book over and over again. I can see Tamanna is here and she says the art is awesome. It absolutely is. So delighted to see a young person and an avid reader, and perhaps the royalty in our lives, attending the bazaar. So delighted to see you here this morning, Tam. The children who come to the bazaar, undoubtedly the most royal people in our lives. The thing is, the one illustration that I want to show. So what happens to Princess Narangi? Does she, she only emerges every night? There is a handsome prince, as there is in most stories of kings and queens. This is King Prithvi of the kingdom of Bund, who falls deeply in love with her. There's just this illustration that makes me go back to the book over and over again. There's just something so romantic about an illustration like this. And bully headed as I may be, this one is one that makes me go, oh really. Jyoti Narayan, welcome to the bazaar this morning. And you say it's awesome. It indeed is a wonderful book put together by Speaking Tiger. We'd recommend this for 7+-year-olds, priced at 250 rupees. Again, for all of you watching on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, all the books that we're talking about and the ones that we're not going to have the time to talk about up in our bazaar. Log into our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click the tab that says bazaar. The first drop down will be Queens and Kings. These books and many, many other books up there. If you enjoy listening to our stories about them, do consider picking them up from Funky Rainbow. We do, of course, move back to another king. And this time, is a really yawny guy. What is this one? Kottavi Raja and his Sleepy Kingdom. This one written by Yashaswini Sampath Kumar and illustrated by Henu Mehtani is the story of a very, very sleepy king. Why do I have this book? Because I love the fact that the king is a complete owl, mostly up all night and then peacefully sleeping through the day. Somehow I see a kindred spirit in this king, but I'm afraid the bazaars really keep me wide awake even during the day. But Kottavi Raja, and Kottavi means a yawn in Tamil. He had a problem, his ministers would be talking about a complex problem and he was mighty bored. He hadn't slept well last night or the night before or the 30 nights before. So when he tried to concentrate on what they were saying, the sentences seemed so garbled that he soon just fell asleep. What happens? How does the question get solved? Of course, the king, being the king, gently wakes his wife up every night, Sujata, the queen, and says, how come you're so energetic and alert through the day? Well, the queen being the practical queen and often always the most sensible one, saying that, well, because I sleep at night, and so should you, and just turns around and goes back to sleep. What does Kotavi Raja do to solve this problem? Because he has to be awake, he has to govern his kingdom, and what remedies does he try to be able to go to sleep at night and stay awake during the day? Muttama laughing away, saying, ha ha, we know why you like this king. Absolutely, you know why I like this king, Sham, and you being subject to several calls past the witching hour about all these ideas, including the idea for the book bazaar. I perfectly remember calling the two of you beyond 1 p.m. at the night. And when you picked up the phone saying, I was bright awake, telling you, Sham, I'm sure, didn't even listen. So I had to repeat the whole thing the next morning when I was quite sleepy. But there, the story of Kotavi Raja and his sleeping kingdom. This one priced at 50 rupees and recommended for 6+ year olds. Our next recommendation this morning is a book which I think perhaps only Funky Rainbow may have a copy of in India. I'm thinking it's perhaps, I'm not sure, but this is a book called Royals, Wise and Otherwise, put together by Feast, which is the Federation of Asian Storytellers. So many of our beloved tellers like Jiva Raghunath, Lavanya Prasad, Trupti Shrikant, Srividya Venkat, Rohini Vij, Aparna Atreya, of course, a lot of other, international tellers as well, who are all part of the Federation of Storytellers. Shruti Sri Raghunath, welcome. Lovely to see you at the bazaar this morning. I'm just loving all the recommendations. All the books are in my list now. No need to write the list, Shruti. Just, click the tab, that says bazaar, look at Queens and Kings, and just send us a WhatsApp message on 99004956665 saying, all of them, please, one copy. Joanne Saldana saying some lovely stories in this compilation. It's a real treasure. Indeed, it is a real feast. It also has some international tellers like Roger Jenkins, Margaret Reed MacDonald, Sheila Wee, Vayu Patosa, a whole bunch of them writing fantastic stories of queens and kings, emperors from Asia, Maharajas, Maharanis, princesses, princes, sultans, chieftains, feudal lords, name it, they're all up there in the book. The thing is, what I really love about this collection of stories is the fact that, I mean, if you think that these are just stories of wisdom, I mean, like the wisdom of the queens and the wisdom of the kings, what I thoroughly and absolutely enjoy is that there are several stories about their follies as well. And we should know that royalty is, well, they're just people, they're just human beings, and they do have their follies as well. The book is so gorgeously illustrated by folk artist Uma Krishnaswamy, and she's done such a wonderful job of making these illustrations. I'm going to show you one that I had earmarked out, but I can't seem to find my bookmark at the moment. These wonderful stories, so beautifully, illustrated in folk art style by Uma Krishnaswamy. And, I want to say every story accompanied with a lot of tips on how you can narrate these stories to young readers. I mean, it's a fantastic resource for parents, teachers. You can see, I'm showing you this page because it gives you cultural notes. It tells you, gives you telling tips. There are lots of extension activities that you can do for younger and older children. Good morning, Rohini Vij. How lovely to see you at the bazaar and at such an apt time. We are delighted. We love your story in this collection as well. And you're saying you're thrilled to see this book here. How could we do a bazaar on royalty without royals, wise and otherwise? Joanne Saldana, a wonderful library educator, based out of Madras, saying to you, Rohini Vij, I love your story in this collection. I've used it with my students. One time we're going to have you come and narrate it at our bazaar for sure, Rohini Vij. But so delighted to see you at the bazaar this morning. And I just have to, this is the illustration that I had bookmarked, the one that went up on that's on the cover as well, a collection of 27 Asian ready to tell folk tales about royals. I suspect only Funky Rainbow has copies of this book in India. I could be wrong, but I like to think that only we have this one, priced at 500 rupees and up in our Queens and Kings Bazaar. 27 stories, not one or two. So a fantastic resource indeed. Our next recommendation this morning is, of course, this lovely book from Tulika that Rohini Vij saying, thank you, Vidya. So excited. We will definitely be in touch with you, Rohini. This one from Tulika Publishers, called Warrior Women, written and illustrated by Tara Anand, focusing on fantastic queens. And what are these queens doing? Well, they're flashing swords, they're firing guns, they're charging on horseback, they're planning strategies, and they're talking war and peace. Well, what a fantastic life these warrior women have had. What awe-inspiring what awe-inspiring acts of valor they have been up to. These 12 warrior women that Tara Anand focuses on in this book, absolutely showing you that queens never took a back seat when it came to ruling their kingdom. And it does really introduce you to some unusual queens. I know we probably have heard of Chand Bibi. We've heard of Rani Lakshmi Bai, definitely. But the book introducing you to warrior women from different parts of the country. There's Rani Velu Nachiyar, about whose life I've been reading so much in the last couple of months. She just fascinates me, and I really hope somebody will do a book on Rani Velu Nachiyar. We are delighted to see one of our biggest supporters here this morning, Asha Nehemiah. Good morning to the royal team at the most fabulous bookstore. A big salam goes out to our most royal supporter yet. We just finished recommending your two wonderful books, The Raja's Mustache and The Grand Chapati Contest, because the queen there who hasn't made a single chapati in her life, I can see many. I may be no queen, but I haven't made a chapati in my life either. And I suspect my mother's watching and going tut just at the moment. Muttama saying Warrior Women is a must-have, unsung heroines we have never heard of. So like I said, Rani Velu Nachiyar, Begum Samru, Joya Thausen, Rani Gaidiniliu, so many queens from different parts of India, whether it's Andhra Pradesh, whether it's the Northeast, whether it's Tamil Nadu, whether it's Punjab. This one really giving us a sneak peek into their fascinating and sometimes turbulent lives. We'd recommend this for 8+-year-olds, priced at 250 rupees. I think I didn't show you, some pictures from the book. You can see that, these dynamic visuals, and really very, I think the book started off, in fact, as an art project. I mean, I think Tara Anand did begin it off as an art project, and then, decided to make it into a picture book for readers 7 or 8+ years old, simply because of the remarkable stories of courage and determination that are tucked away, that their lives are all about. So like I said, 8+-year-olds, priced at 250 rupees and published by Tulika. Our next one, about, a collection of stories about a king who becomes wise. I know many of you who watch the Bazaar week after week are huge fans of this publishing house called Jyotsna Prakashan and this particular author, Madhuri Purandare. Now, this one, a chapter book, because you can see these I mean, you can see there's quite a lot of text on the pages, and Madhuri Purandare's pastel shaded lovely illustrations. Now, why do we have it in our bazaar? Because the first story about the king who becomes wise, and I love that title, the fact that he wasn't exactly so wise and then became wise as the story progressed. Was This is a story about a king who was extremely greedy. What was he greedy for? You think he was greedy for power? Was he greedy to conquer lands? Well, a king after my own heart. He was greedy for jalebis, laddus, chaklis, and kadbolis, of course, which I assume are like kadabus basically. And obviously, the king could definitely not keep good health. He would often have coughs, colds, and complain of a terrible tummy upset. What do you think will happen if you eat platefuls of laddus, platefuls of jalebis, platefuls of, all the treats that, come out of an Indian kitchen? Of course, using Juan Saldana say, I feel this king, me too, a king after my own heart, this man. Well, no stomach upset at the moment, which means definitely more jalebis and laddus that can be eaten. And of course, there was the worried queen at her wits' end in the story, and the prime minister, who's a very, very wise man. And what do? They suggest that the king gets to a doctor. Now, Madhuri Purandare just using, the story of royalty, I mean, using a king and queen, but ultimately telling you stories about why you should keep your surroundings clean, why personal hygiene matters, why health is one of the most important assets in your life. But none of that preachy stuff being said to you directly, only subtly through these stories. And the first one about the king becoming wise, really. And huge admirers we are of Madhuri Purandare's writing and illustration. This one we'd recommend for 7+ year olds, or maybe if you're narrating it to a younger reader, you could read it out to her or him. This one published by Jyotsna Prakashan, priced at 90 rupees. A must have about the king who becomes wise. And Joanne Saldana, none of that wisdom, unfortunately, seeping into my consciousness, even after reading the book a couple of times around, really. Our next set of recommendations is a series that many of you know and love. This one is the History Mystery series by author Natasha Sharma. And because it's a bazaar of queens and kings, I'm going to tell you about my favorite book in the series. And I can see Joanne Saldana saying, I'm afraid these messages not seeping into her consciousness as well. But you know what? For parents and teachers watching, there's got to be some way to put it into the kids, into the kids' consciousnesses. But well, let's not, you don't have to, listen to advice from these adults who are not doing the right things. Back to the History Mystery series. I'm picking my favorite book, in the series, which is Razia and the Pesky Presents, which is, of course, Harshika Udasi saying, "Ooh, history, mystery." Razia is, I just love the concept of the book itself. She is Razia Sultan, but when she's, a woman ruler, why is she not Razia Sultana? You have to read this charming, laugh out loud story, basically. And what's happening to this dynamic ruler of Delhi is that she is completely annoyed. She's annoyed because somebody is repeatedly sending her some pesky presents. What is that? Girly dresses, soppy poems, resins by the dozen, and even what's more, sending out notes that challenge her right to rule over Delhi. How dare that person, whoever it is, how dare he does or she does that? Now she has to get to the bottom of this mystery. And how does she set about doing it? So beautifully set in those historical periods. And, for the youngest of readers, along with a mystery, giving you a sense of history. Of course, Razia is illustrated by the delightful Priya Kurian. So you can expect the illustrations to just leap off the pages and, sort of really bring these mysteries alive to you. So, well, these mysteries which you can never hope to find in your history books. We can't, of course, leave out the kings, even though we're featuring queens prominently. We've got to throw a few kings in. And the one that I, enjoy very much in this series as well is Rajaraja and the Swapped Sacks. Again, Natasha Sharma's book, but this one illustrated by Nilomi Jesrani. What is this about? King Rajaraja Chola is very upset. Everything that he's been shipping to China, mind you, folks, like, is it's pepper that they're shipping to China from the Chola kingdoms down south. Somebody is taking off all that pepper and replacing it with goat droppings. Ha ha, what can, and what's worse, the Chinese are now threatening to stop all trade. Familiar cadences, anyone? History repeats itself, doesn't it, really? Again, how is the emperor going to solve this mystery? Really lovely way of giving us a sense of, different historical periods, not heavy reads, not heavy mysteries, and the history just sort of tucked into the mysteries quite nicely. We'd recommend this for 8, 9 plus year olds or 8 plus year olds, depending on the reading levels, each one priced at 199 rupees and published by Duckbill. If you don't, and of course, the other books in the series, there's Akbar and the Tricky Traitor, there's Ashoka, there's Shah Jahan and the Ruby Robbers, there's Ashoka and the Muddled Messages, a lovely way to introduce history, our history, to the youngest of readers through queens and kings. Only one queen this far and 4 kings. I hope Natasha's setting that one right very, very quickly. I'm going to say hello to a bunch of friends who've joined us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Before I recommend one or two more books and then invite our guest for the day, there's Muttama, of course, who I really, really deeply, would be so much more happy if she was sitting opposite us, creating the usual royal natak bazi that she does, that adds so much life and dil and jaan to our bazaar. But, that's going to happen very, very soon, I'm sure. Rohini Vid saying, we just love the History Mystery series. Much to love about there. Smith's Bookery, how lovely to see you here this morning. If you love our bazaar, we want them cakes. We have seen your Instagram handle and the cakes that you bake. My gosh, those books and cakes. Well, we're always ready for parcel service. Tell us when you're baking the next batch and we'll have them shipped all the way from Delhi to Bangalore. Yallara Pustaka, so lovely to see you. Haripriya Batula, CGS Salamander, how lovely to see you at the bazaar, Andrew. The Purple Bicycle, the Matchbox Girl, Deepthi Paliyat, Anjani Rajagopal, Penguin Stirs, delighted to see you here this morning. Sarina Rupani, Atirai Bookstore, so lovely that a bookstore. I wonder where you're based out of. Please do get in touch with us. We love the fact that independent bookstores do so much to spread the love of reading. We would love to hear from you. You can write to us at funkyrainbowmail@gmail.com. Mondal Deblina, Shelley, Wordywood Library, Wonderleaf Club, Red Eye Chapter, so many friends with so many new names on Instagram. Anu Viv, KV Bharadwaj, Ash Surain, Muttama again, Joanne Saldana, Moon Mitra Das, Harshika Udasi, Trina Maitra, Shayoni Basu. So delighted to see you, Shayoni Basu. And like I said yesterday, I know our guest of the day has some wonderful books. not just because she's a queen of historical fiction, she's got a queen of a publisher with her. What lovely books you have brought out in the Queen series. So a royal salute going out to the publishers, to Shayoni and her team. Divya Menon, Avyukta Nameya Nair, Shruti Sri Raghunath, Shobana Joshi, Haripriya Batula, Pranav Pratap Singh, Shubh S.K., Ramendra Kumar, Jyoti Narayanan, Rohini Vij, and Asha Nehemiah. So utterly and absolutely delighted to see friends, old and new, at our Queens and Kings Bazaar. Sumana Kundagrami, welcome, hello, and we're delighted to see you at the bazaar as well. Going to recommend maybe 3 books before I say hello to our guest of the day. This one, which which I have recommended, I think perhaps in every bazaar where I could have possibly put this book in, it's got to be one of my favorite ones ever. Unprincess by Manjula Padmanabhan, the lovely story of 3 unprincess-like princesses, 3 fantastic heroines, Urmila, Kavita, and Shayoni. I did say there is royalty in there, Shayoni, and braver, bolder, and much more resolute than the usual wilting, swooning princesses. I love this book. I think it breaks every single stereotype that exists about women not being able to do things. And I'd love to share that I met Manjula at the Hindu Lit Fest, and this one is just my very own autographed copy of the book. Beautifully illustrated by Manjula, beautifully written, whimsical, feisty girls that absolutely tell a fantastic story, of what it takes to be, why we should all be happy being unprincesses. This one published by Penguin, priced at 150 rupees. It's a must read for every young year olds, I think, but we'd recommend it for every adult who enjoys a great read. Published by Penguin, priced at 150 rupees. The next one, of course, is The Girl Who Chose, Sita, the queen that, who is sort of, many of us, growing up, listening to the story of the Ramayana, listening to the story of Sita, and often thinking she's, such a shy and quiet kind of queen. Well, this one, The Girl Who Chose, which is the Ramayana interpreted by Devdutt Patnaik, has hinged the story on 3 crucial decisions made by Sita. He believes that the story of Rama and the story of the Ramayana is absolutely hinged on 3 decisions that Sita takes. I mean, so not 3 decisions, 5 choices that Sita, made, 5 decisions that Sita made. Of course, Devdutt illustrating the book in his classic Devdutt Patnaik style. And, this old story that, which has been, perhaps, we've been listening to for centuries, decades now, over 2000 years ago, written by Valmiki, but interpreted from Sita's perspective by Devdutt Patnaik, one of India's most popular mythologists. This one priced at 199 rupees and published by Penguin. It actually exists as a dual book as well. There's The Girl Who Chose, which is the story of the Ramayana, but I don't have that one to show you just now. There's Boys Who Fought, which when you turn it ulta, then telling you the story of the princes from the Mahabharata. This is a new age interpretation of the Ramayana, which will surely, enthrall young readers. My next recommendation is about a princess that many of us have grown up reading, about. And, this is one from Western Shayoni Basu. There's so much conflation of history and mythology in our political sphere that it's now problematic to talk about Ramayana and history. Indeed, it is. And we really don't think that, mythology and history should get conflated. There should be a distinct line between the two, and one can't mistake one for the other, no jingoism that needs to come forward, in the name of our mythology or our legends or our traditions, and mixing it up and confusing it for history. Yes, I do know that we have these controversial questions that come up every time that we talk about history, especially with the present dispensation. It's so hard to understand, what is real and what is not. Great point, Shayani Basu, and much to talk about there. And what I think is that many publishers doing a great job of actually drawing that line and saying that there is a distinct difference between the two. Yes, no amount of that needs to, nothing of these stories need to be conflated with our politics or, with our history. Of course, like I was saying, this story of Cinderella that many of us have grown up, reading several, across the years. But the reason I'm recommending our next book for the day, and it's a fantastic set of fairy tale revolutions. This one is called Cinderella Liberator, written by that wonderful writer of our times, Rebecca Solnit. This entire series has been such an eye-opener. It's been with us only in the last 10 days. I've picked this one because there are the queens and there are the princesses and there is Cinderella, of course. And this one, which begins with Cinderella in her rags and longing to go to the ball, but not sure that she can do it, because of where she is. But enter her fairy godmother in this story, and the fairy godmother is none other than the Cinderella Liberator. What a fantastic way to turn a fairy tale on its head. This one illustrated by Arthur Rackham, and I can show you this. I'd recommend this certainly for children 9, 10 plus years in age, and to all adults who've read these fairy tales growing up, because these retellings truly making you think sometimes even about those issues that Shayoni just raised when she put up her question on conflating, tradition, legend, history, and mythology. Now, this one, does Cinderella truly get free from those kitchen cinders, and what and who does she really turn out to be? It's a fantastic one. It's a must in all school libraries. We rarely put Western books into our collection, but I couldn't resist putting this one in because of what a powerful, fairy tale revolution. In fact, the series is called a Fairy Tale Revolution series. This one indeed is priced at 699 rupees, published by Vintage. I'm just going to quickly show you the covers of the other ones. There's Blue Blood, and you can see every title has been changed, to interpret the fairy tale for contemporary times. The other one in the series that I really enjoyed, Blue Blood by Mallory Blackman, Hansel and Greta, and no prizes for guessing who the Greta of this cover is. Basically, yes, indeed, modeled after Greta Thunberg. This one by Jeanette Winterson. And the duckling. There is no ugly, there is no pretty, just the story of the duckling, done by Camilla Shamsi. What a fantastic series of fairy tales this one is. I think many of you are going to enjoy reading it. They're certainly keepers, these books. So do consider picking them up and reading them if fairy tales inverted on the head, are your cup of tea. We welcome our guest for the morning, the one and only Devika Rangachari. I'm going to let Sham bring her on screen. Is she there? Is she there, Sham? Yeah, okay. The
Hi.
wonderful Devika Rangachari. Welcome to Funky Rainbow's Queen and King's Bazaar. Delighted to have the queen of Indian historical fiction joining us at the bazaar this morning. A big round of applause. Customers clapping really loud and hard from where she is, really, for a friends on Instagram. I'm afraid we can't stream this interview up on Instagram. Please do join us on YouTube, on Funky Rainbow's channel, or on Facebook to catch this fantastic, conversation with Devika Rangachari. So, of course, I mean, I think everyone who's watching Devika is already a huge, huge fan of your writing. And it was pretty much this book that made us think of this bazaar even more than Queen Elizabeth or the passing of Prince Philip. It was the arrival of Queen of Fire on our shelves last Friday that prompted the Queen's and King's Bazaar. The wonderful author of of this lovely trilogy of books, and hopefully a lot more books coming into this series, soon in this year, next year. I don't know. I hope Devika is going to tell us in the course of her conversation. But Queen of Ice, Queen of Earth, and Queen of Fire. It's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you Devika Rangachari, author, historian, and someone who's won so many awards for her book, Queen of Ice, that we are, sending out a big royal salute your way for being with us this morning, Devika.
Thank you so much, Vidya. Thank you for all the wonderful things you
Hang
said.
on one second. Just hang on one second, Devika. I'm not able to hear you. I'm just going to check if it's something with my. Can you hear me, Devika?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, I'm not able to hear her. Hang on one sec. I don't know what I can do. Just hold on a second. Shall I change that setting, which I did last time? And no, one second. I'm going to try this. Devika, can you just say something? No, Sham. Can you just try that setting thing
Can
which
you
we
hear
did
me?
just now? I'm absolutely not able to hear her at all. Yeah.
Should I say something else?
Oh, yes, there you are. I can hear
Okay.
you now. I don't know
Okay.
what it is with my, every time the guest comes up, it just, like sort of goes blank. And like I told you when we were testing yesterday, I'm like, I can't not hear you, right? I can't sort of not hear you say what you're saying. But yes, welcome to the bazaar. I'm so sorry I interrupted you. Go on and,
Not at
say
all.
what.
Thank you so much, Vidya. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for featuring my books on your bazaar. And before I start, I just like to say that I think I speak for everybody here that we enormously admire what you and Sham and Muthuma are doing at Funky Rainbow. You're, giving us something to hold on to in these difficult times and not letting us lose sight of what we hold dear. So just like to say that right at the beginning, and it's an honor to be here as part of your book bazaar. So yeah, I'm looking forward to our chat.
So like I said, thank you so much. I can't say how much that support matters to us. I mean, we it makes a huge difference that writers like you endorse what we're doing at the bazaar. Writers like you make it possible for us to to stock wonderful books on our bookshelves, these wonderful books that you write, sending them out to children here, there, everywhere. It really means the world to us. And in so many ways, I'm in not so many words, I have to say that it's the huge community of writers and illustrators, Indian writers and illustrators, who have championed us right through a very, very difficult year. If you're here 1 year later, sometimes I think we're running in the same place and we're right back where we started last year when the pandemic was raging outside. We're still here thanks to people like you, Devika. So a big thank you from Team Funky Rainbow to you and to all the other writers and illustrators and publishers who are watching. I'm going to, start off with my questions, for you, Devika. And, I read Queen of Fire just, 2 days ago. I wanted to tell you that it's just such a lovely book. You picked it up thinking, is there something that you don't know about the Rani of Jhansi? I mean, we've grown up, hearing poems about the Rani of Jhansi, reading comics on the lives of Rani of Jhansi and her valor. That's just been the stuff of so many stories we've heard as a young people, that your book introduced to us such a different facet to her personality. Was she this confident, brave woman that we think she is? Are there never doubts in the minds of people who are strong and confident and brave? I think Queen of Fire really opened out nuances of her character that I so thoroughly enjoyed reading. And for all our viewers out there, if you haven't read it, if you haven't got it, several copies waiting for you, waiting to be shipped out from Funky Rainbow's shelves. So with that, I want to say you've been researching gender in Indian history for many years now. Was that what pointed you to the fact that women's stories seem to be missing in history, and our history books seriously lack women rulers?
Yeah, so I'm glad you liked Queen of Fire, Vidya. Thanks for your wonderful words on it. Um, yeah, so actually, when I was doing my MPhil, which is what you do between your MA and your PhD, I was looking for something to research, and I came upon this text called the Raj Tarangani, which is a history of Kashmir from the earliest times to the 12th century AD. And when I started reading this, oh yeah, I wrote some stories from it, yeah, for CPT. Yeah, so when I started reading it, I realized there were all these wonderful women characters who were appearing, both royal and non royal, in the narrative of Kashmir that didn't appear in any of the other histories that I'd read on Kashmir. So there was a clear disconnect there. And the more I read, the more I realized that there was something, uh, there was some disjuncture there that I needed to explore. And so then I went on to look at the original sources pertaining to the women that the author Kalhana was describing. And that is when the gender bias that goes into the writing of history hit me actually like a ton of bricks. Yes, you are aware of a gender bias that exists in every field all through your life, but you're sort of aware of it somewhere on the periphery, not until it like sort of affects you directly. But this was
Right.
something that was a revelation, and it's also a factor of the way history is taught. I mean, I'm we had gone up to we'd finished our ME and we were still only very dimly aware of this bias. So, and then I started looking up these women and reading more about them, and then realizing that the alarming and absolutely ubiquitous attempt was to make these women invisible in history writing. So there was this kind of concerted attempt both on the part of male historians as well as female historians to sort of
Right.
trivialize both royal and non-royal women in the past, their contributions, their presence, and so on. And that is how I decided that okay, I should focus on that for my MPhil and my doctoral research and my postdoctoral research. So this it was all about putting women back into the historical narrative where they rightfully belong, and to let people know that they're actually missing out a huge part of their historical past that they have a right to know about, and they're currently not reading about because all the women are made invisible.
Right. So well said. The invisible women, in history. In fact, till you wrote The Queen of Ice, we were oblivious to the existence of a queen like Didda. So, I mean, I want you to tell us about this fabulous award-winning Queen series. There's Queen of Ice about Didda, a 10th century Queen of Kashmir, this Queen of Earth, about Prithvi Mahadevi, a ninth century, queen from Orissa, and the latest one, Queen of Fire, about 19th century Rani of Jhansi, Lakshmi Bai. What made you, tell us about each of those stories, and tell us what made you write about, two lesser known queens and one very famous one.
Okay, so Queen of Ice is about Didda, who ruled Kashmir in the 10th century for around 50 years. And she formed an important part of my doctoral research, a part of which was on Kashmir. Now, she is not the only woman ruler of Kashmir. There were more, and she's not the only remarkable woman in Kashmir who left a really, really significant mark in every way. There were more, but I chose to, write her story for young readers who would otherwise not have access to these details, simply because she's, in a way, her story is extremely inspiring. She had to face a lot of problems in order to maintain herself on the throne. There was, of course, the trying to sit on a throne in a patriarchal context. So she's a woman who's challenging strictures that prevent women from exercising authority. Apart from that, she was lame. She couldn't walk. She had a deformed foot, so she needed somebody to carry her around from place to place in order to move. Despite that, she ruled. She was ambitious and unapologetically so. She was very clear about what she wanted. She wanted to exercise power. She wanted Kashmir to prosper under her rule. And she sort of abandoned all scruples more or less to that aim. But she was very clear about what she wanted in her life. So and here was a woman who's also always vilified in all secondary writings on Kashmir, that just because she dared to exercise power, she is described as notorious, dissolute, lacking morals, and so on, which is something that's very typical when you deal with a woman in history. All the men are treated, or rather the royal males are treated with in a very different way. You look at the administrative contributions, the battles they won, the way they extended their kingdoms. When it comes to a woman who dares to be in a position of power, it's always looking at them from the point of view of morals. Were they good people? Were they of good character? Did they go to temples? Did they pray? So this is a huge bias right there, which you will see if you even just go and read your textbooks. You will find this bias just hitting you in the face all the time. So I thought her story really deserved to be known, which is why I wrote it for not just for young adults, but to anybody who wanted to engage with the past and to know about something that they didn't currently know. Prithvi Mahadevi's story, Queen of Earth, was part of my postdoctoral thesis, which looked at women in Orissa. Um, she again was an extremely remarkable woman who's been almost completely written out of the historical narrative. So if you actually look at histories of Orissa, in the ninth century, you'll probably, yeah, you'll either not hear her mention, or if you read about her anywhere, it'll be to say that her rule started the downfall of the dynasty, because a woman ruling is equal to disaster, equal to something that's completely unnatural, which is abhorrent, which goes against the grain, goes against nature. She also, in fact, had as much or even more of a challenge than Didda faced, because she was actually ruling over a populace that was hostile to her, because her father had put her in charge of a throne of a conquered territory. But she still managed to hold her own, and to leave a presence, to sort of issue inscriptions that hinted at the fact that she was comfortable in that position of power and wanted to actually perpetuate her rule, and so on. So again, this is something that I don't think anybody reading their textbooks or anyway otherwise engaging with the history of India is going to know about. So I decided to write her story. um, Queen of Fire was, in that sense, is different from the other two, because, of course, this deals with Rani Lakshmibai Jhansi, whose story is extremely well known. Her clash with the British in the 19th century, the manner in which she tried hard to retain her throne of Jhansi when the British were eyeing it. The point is that she's always treated in all narratives and stories as a larger than life figure who's almost a goddess, which is the typical way in which you treat women when you write about them in history. Either they are goddesses who are superhuman, who do not have any doubts, apprehensions, fears, or anything, and just know exactly what they're going to achieve, um, or they are treated as people who are not meant to be part of the narrative, some trivial, unimportant. Let's not talk about them. So whenever she is talked about, it's always about her battle strategies, the way in which she just like went ahead with her solution to save Jhansi. There's no human component at all. And obviously, she was less than 30 years old when all this was happening. She was a young woman who'd been put into a very difficult position. She'd recently lost her husband, who, in any case, was a very ineffectual ruler. She had been ruling, while he was alive, simply because he had other interests and other concerns. So, and this whole skirmish with the British, she had to actually arrive at a solution that was acceptable to everybody, but also dealing with the bias. Everybody expected a woman to fail, so she was surrounded by males who were a bit suspicious, wondering whether she was going to lead them to triumph or not.
Mhm.
So obviously she had doubts and fears. Obviously she had all these worries, and so on, which is never acknowledged. And also, I wanted to talk in this book about the relationship that she developed with her adopted son. Now, her own son died in infancy. She adopted this boy called Damodar, who she felt was going to be an heir to the throne. But the British, of course, denied this adoption. But, the whole thing of trying to bond with this child whom she'd adopted, brought into the palace, and whose future she was fighting for, that's again something that you don't really hear about her, because again it's like it's in her story is always dealt with in a very clinical manner. Yes, she did
Mm.
this. Yes, she adopted this boy. Yes, she went ahead, and but what was the relationship between the two? So I've tried to, in Queen of Fire, bring in the human element there, talk about her as a woman, a real woman who is prey to as many doubts and
Mm.
worries as the rest of us, but it's just had to somehow stifle them for various reasons and just go ahead. So I think, yeah, that's pretty much about my
So
queens.
wonderful, so wonderful. So many people posting comments. Devika, Deepa Agarwal saying hello, and she says classic method. When you were talking about how the stories are written from a male perspective, she says classic method to put women down. Joanne Saldana saying this is a narrative that we all seem to have accepted. Deepika Kaura saying things haven't changed much in the context of powerful women even today. And Grey Matters, Archana bringing up a really fantastic point, saying that ridiculous movie adaptations by Bollywood certainly don't help in any way. So glad that you wrote this one, Devika. And Deepika Kaura again saying, fascinating to understand the human side of Lakshmi Bai. It's no wonder that this book, I mean, Queen of Ice, was on the White Raven list, won the Neve Young Adult Book Award, was shortlisted for the Sahitya Academy's Bal Sahitya Puraskar, and has been optioned to be made into a movie, or television series by Netflix. I mean, how fantastic is that? A book for young adults, or like you say, any reader interested in history, going on to our screen, hopefully addressing the issue that Archana brought up of ridiculous Bollywood adaptations of the lives of these queens. Shruti Sri Raghunath saying, superb. I'm looking forward to reading this book. Young girls really need to read this. So delighted that you've actually written these thing. I know Queen of Earth was also on the Parag honor list, isn't it, Devika? It was on the 2021 honor list of Parag, an initiative of the Tata Trust. And Devika does have other books of history, one that we're going to recommend, going forward in the bazaar, about 10 Indian monarchs whose amazing stories you may not know. There are tales of love and adventure. There is Harshavardhana, the merry mischief of Gopal Bhand, the wit of Tenali Raman, amongst so many other books of historical fiction that she has written, all up on Funky Rainbow's website. You can just search for Devika Rangachari, and all her books will come up. But most definitely the Queen series, perhaps one of the most compelling reads of recent times. Tell me, Devika, one of the things that and Shayoni had brought it up when we were talking about history being conflated in our political sphere with mythology, with legend, with just so many aspects of society. I believe that, especially from reading your books, history is actually a powerful tool to dismantle and do away with stereotypes. Do you agree?
Of course, definitely.
It
So,
is, yeah.
I mean, if you're just talking now, since this is about, queens and women, about the gender stereotype. And this is something I've said in various sessions earlier. What alarmed me was when I used to talk about, powerful women figures in schools to children, they would always grind to a halt after mentioning a few names. Again, Rani Lakshmibai, as you suspect, there was Razia, there was Jahanara, Noor Jahan, and then that was it. And I used to keep trying to take them back further in time. And the problem about history writing is the reason why you hear so much about Rani Lakshmibai is because of the evidence that exists for
Ah,
her presence, which can't be wished away. So if you're writing a history of that time, you cannot actually leave out this huge chunk because the narrative will become untidy then. So therefore, she's grudgingly put in into the
okay.
narrative, but then she's made into a as a goddess kind of figure, so that in any case she's not treated as normal. These two can very conveniently be left out of any history that you're talking about because the evidence for them is very limited. The further back in time you go,
Mm,
the fewer are your sources. So, you really don't know anything. So, you can very happily leave out all these women because nobody's going to question you unless you are a historian like me who's saying, excuse me, what are you trying to not tell us here? So if you're talking about and it's this gender, these stereotypes are so alarming that when I've actually done sessions asking children whether they think women existed during the Harappan civilization times, 99.9% of the time they will say no, that's the instinctive reaction because that is the kind of history they're taught. So
mm,
these stereotypes that women actually sat around all through the past only at home within the domestic context. And of course, textbooks tell you a lot about the clothes they wore and the jewelry they liked, as if to say that was their domain. So, power, politics, and the outside world was basically the domain of men. So this stereotype gets perpetuated, from generation to generation, so that it has a direct bearing on today's context, which is why again today, you know, just simply because we are taught over and over again that women did not matter. So we
mm,
still find women apparently not mattering in today's context, which is why you have so much gender bias even today, which is why women are even today fighting battles that are so ridiculous just to be acknowledged. But then that is a factor of the way a vicious stereotype can just get perpetuated over and over again. So if you use history as a tool to correct this stereotype, which is largely what I am trying to do through my books, through my writing. It can go a long way into correcting a lot of the ills that plague us in today's society. So but then the unfortunate thing about history again is, which I've said over and over again, everybody feels that they know everything about history, which is something that I can't even claim despite having studied it all my life. So you can't just make generalizations. History is a very specific, rigorous discipline. We go through a lot of training to get to the point where we can actually make assertions about the past. So, I think people need to acknowledge that and be, a little discerning when they make comments about history. So that would go a long way into correcting stereotypes. Yeah.
absolutely. So well responded. Archana saying there is this piece from Harappan excavation, perhaps, where they found a warrior skeleton with weapons and they assumed it was male. Makes me so mad. Deepa Agarwal saying we need many more books that bust gender stereotypes. Keep going, Devika. The point that you brought up actually about research, I mean, the fact that you need to have research to back the books that you're writing, especially, you need to have, like, you need to be able to find good material that you can use as the basis for your writing. So I want to ask, especially in a genre like historical fiction, how do you blend the history and the fiction? Where does the history end? Where does the fiction begin? And how do they come together, as you've done so wonderfully in the Queen's books?
So Vidya, okay, if you look at Queen of Ice, there aren't too many sources pertaining to Didda. There are a few coins she issued, there are a few inscriptions, which are all there. I mean, you can see them in the museum even today in Srinagar. And then, of course, there is the Raj Tarangini, which is one man's word against, all modern historians and everything. But then when you corroborate the details in the Raj Tarangini, which actual evidence, you realize that, okay, this man was actually speaking the truth. He'd actually verified his material. So we use the Raj Tarangini as a source for Kashmir, quite a lot. But again, I can't, there are so many gaps in Dida's history that I needed to fill in. So I had to be both, wear my whatever a cap of psychology and detection and try and understand how a woman would have behaved under these circumstances in that context. But again, not let my imagination run too wild, because I cannot make wild assertions simply because the reader might not know anything. It
Right.
has to be consistent with what we know about the history of the times. So I have to be as accurate as possible while trying to fictionalize her story. Another The problem worsened actually with Queen of Earth, because there are only two inscriptions that Prithvi Mahadevi issued
Just
that
two.
exists for her. Yeah, and otherwise there are stray mentions in the history of the dynasty that she ruled, her father's dynasty, and so on. So again, putting these things together, there are a lot of hints that she provides in her public proclamations that tell you what she must have been like. And again, trying to go back in time and again try and understand her psychology and understand, try and fill in the gaps without being historically inaccurate. This is a completely different problem. There's too much material on her, particularly in British, in archives and in our documentation and so on. But from there, again, as I said, try and separate the clinical information, the dry information, from the woman who's been buried under all that information, and try and extricate her and resurrect her human side. That is the challenge in this case. So I have to tread a fine line between fiction and fact always when I'm writing, because I otherwise might as well be writing a textbook and just telling you these are the facts. And I know that history is a dreaded subject in most schools, and children try and run away from it. So my aim is not to contribute to that kind of impression, but to make my readers aware that history is interesting and can be read as and enjoyed, and all the while painlessly learning about something about your past. Yeah.
So such a lovely response and such a good insight into the kind of problems that you face. Too little material, too much material, both of them, causing. I mean, like making it harder to write their stories. Asha Nehme is saying beautifully crafted fiction backed by solid historical research. Such a rare combination. Devika does it so well. Deepika Kaura says it must be so difficult to tread the line between fact and fiction. How much imagination can you use without treading on facts? Gray Matters, Archana saying I had never heard of Prithvi Mahadevi. It was such a wonderful read. Shayoni has a question, for you. And I'm so glad that your publisher has one on our show. Question for Devika: where is the next queen from? Another Kashmir one, methinks. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get the answer to the next. You're getting some clues to what Devika's next book. And when the book is announced, remember that you heard about it first at Funky Rainbow's Bazaar. Shayoni says maybe a Southern Queen. I'm keeping fingers crossed and hoping it's a Southern Queen. But tell us, Devika, what the next one in the series is going to be.
Before I answer that, I would just like to say that I was really fortunate to have a wonderful publisher in Shiny Basu, and of course Anushka, who's also involved with Queen of Ice, and and it was so reassuring when I wrote Queen of Ice to begin with, because I was nervous about how it would be accepted by the gatekeepers, the
Ah,
librarians and the teachers and the parents, who would say, "Oh no, there's blood and gore. Our children can't handle this, and we don't want them to read this book," and so on. And they would, and Shiny and Anushka just said, "Go ahead and write what you want, and we will market it." And you know that. So I lost my fear in subsequent books simply because they were backing me. So I'd like to really thank them, particularly Shiny, who's like really stood like a rock behind me. And anyone would be fortunate to have her as a publisher. Where is the next queen from? There are two actually in my head. I've been wanting to write one for on Kashmir, actually, before Dida's time, 9th century. Another remarkable woman who's again been completely wiped out of history, and who had, if I may say so, an even more spectacular history than Didda. So I've been really wanting to write a history. So I'm going to get down to that soon. And yes, I do want to write about a Southern queen because I think I've focused a lot on the North and on the East, and I think it's time for me to move to the South. And considering I am from the South, so I should actually write something about my own heritage. So yeah, I mean, yes, you heard it here first, Vidya, and let's see. Fingers crossed that I'm able to write these books.
We're absolutely looking forward to those lovely books. We're rooting for the South Indian Queen. We're not saying that don't write about the Queen from Kashmir, but we want equal representation down south as well. The thing is, I mean, and we have a young boy, I mean, of 9, who's a huge fan of history. So writing in and saying, I love history. This is Avyukt. And I want to say that, I just love history so much. I mean, Muttama is clapping away for Shayani and Team Duckbill. So really a big, clap going out to, like I said, to queens who've really made this possible, who've made these books possible. And you're right, I remember in a school telling, one of the teachers and librarians that the ambition, the ruthless ambition of Didda, and I remember her response was that, women need not be that ruthlessly ambitious, right? I mean, it's always good to be moderate in some way or the other. And I'm like, if there are ruthlessly ambitious women, they must be there. Why not? There are women of all kinds all over. So I can well imagine what Shayani and Anushka may have thought when they got the books, but yet it's fantastic to see women like we know in our lives all around us. It's great to see that books that come out that reflect those character traits from different queens as well. Archana saying, suggesting Rani Padmavati too, please. The entire focus on her being a beauty and Johar, please give us. It's too much wrong information on that queen, says Archana Natraj. But I wanted to say, ask you, Devika, you brought up the thing of good books that children can read. Are there any favorite reads that you may want to recommend on, queens, and so that the kings don't feel left out as well, right? Maybe some princes and queens that you may have read recently or even earlier that you want to recommend to our readers?
Yeah, I read this book as a child and I loved it. And it's about, a king per se, but let's be very
Right.
clear that it's complete mythology. It's nothing to do with history. And this is
Yes.
Krishna and Sudama, published by CBT, written by A. Shivakumar. I think it was a wonderful story. I really loved it. But it's, as I said, it's a story, it's mythology. So let's separate the two. But it's a wonderful read for anybody. So I think that since we're talking about queens and kings, I'd also like to mention uh, Subhadra Sengupta's The Teenage Diary of Jodhba. I think what she wrote, she also wrote about Jahanara. I mean, her works are really pioneering in that sense because she actually, I think, was the first one to write about a teenage royal personage woman from history, and her thoughts and document. And this is a very important person. And again, you don't know much about her in history, and you only know about her after she's married to the Mughal Emperor Akbar. So I thought that this was a great book, sort of telling people that this is also a legitimate thing to read, and among what I've read recently is I'd like to mention in the same series, The Teenage Diary of Mehrun Nissa, who later becomes Noor Jahan, written by Deepa Agarwal, which I found very interesting. And I really liked the way she hinted at the aspects in Mehrun Nissa's personality, her ambition, her sort of ruthlessness that went on to make her what she was as the Mughal queen, Noor Jahan. I think she's done that really well. And there's so many others, but I think I'll just restrict myself to.
Yeah, Teenage Diary series, just a lovely insight into the lives of many queens as teenagers, basically. But great recommendations, all of them up at Funky Rainbow. Our young historian, historical buff Avyukt saying, Auntie, there's another South Indian queen, Rani Mangammal. Please do research and think of writing a book about her. And since Avyukt is putting in his suggestion. My current fascination has been Velu Nachiyar. I've just been so fascinated reading bits and bytes of information on Velu Nachiyar. And because everybody is putting in their suggestions, I'm sending mine in quite humbly as well.
Thank you. Lots for me to think about here.
So, of course, a lot of people watching us at the bazaar, mostly parents, teachers, and librarians, Devika. What can they do to get their children to understand that history is best understood from multiple perspectives, and also that gender equality really actually begins at home? Do you have some, tips and suggestions for the parents, teachers, and librarians watching us today?
Uh, well, two parts to your question. History, it can best be understood by multiple perspectives, of course, because it's some historian who's writing your textbook, your child's textbook, or your child's history. That person has a bias. There is no such thing as objective history. So that person is telling you what that person wants you to know. So you need to be aware that that is not the definitive work on history that you're ever going to get to read. And if you really do have an interest in history and you really want your child to know more about, or your student to know more about a particular period or particular aspect of history, then read a lot. And I think historical fiction also plays a huge part in this. You can read stories about that particular aspect, or other histories that have been written, and then form an impression. And as I said, don't assume you know everything about history, because chances are you don't.
Right.
And as I've always said, my favorite example, you wouldn't dare to make assertions about physics or chemistry because you don't know. History is as specialized. You do not know simply because you have read, say, you know, whatever, the Amar Chitrakatha series or other stories or whatever. These are things that people are telling you as stories. It doesn't necessarily mean it's fact. So you
Right.
need to distinguish fact from fiction. And also, I think gender equality, it begins at home. Yes, it means that you do not just target your daughter and say, oh, this is what you need to do and this is how you need to behave. It means you target your son as well, and you say you need to read this and you need to read this book. And it's not necessarily that you walk into a bookshop and you say, oh my goodness, let me steer my son towards the books that have a blue cover and not a pink cover, because my son shouldn't read about princesses and queens. That is, the department of the daughter. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that whatever I write is for both boys and girls. It is for both men and women. And I think that the minute you start making a distinction right there and saying, oh, let's not read about this, let us not talk about that, that means you're perpetuating a gender bias right there. That's going to take very insidious forms
Mm.
as your children grow. So, these are small ways in which you to involve your children in whatever discussion you're having on history, whatever, thing that you've uncovered. Maybe even have a debate. In fact, start off this debate. Do your children know about women of the past? Do they think that some women are more important than the others, or do they think that men are more important than women? Why do they have that impression? Where are
Mm.
they getting that impression from? Does it have any bearing on the present context? Are they interested in knowing more? And so it's a learning process for everyone, I think. Just because you ask the question or because you say that we need to know more about women, it's not a formula that immediately gives you a solution that says, okay, here is the information, because the information is difficult to come by. As I said, the sources are fewer the further back in time you go. But I always say that the fact that you ask this question, that you problematize it, that you say that we are not really getting to know what we should be getting to know, is itself a beginning, it's a start. And so, the more you read up, the more you look for information, you will come by it. So I think, yeah, it's a long process, but it's an important process. So, you need to involve both the boys and the girls in whatever you do in your home
Such a
and in your
such a
schools.
Yes, absolutely. So well said. I can see so many comments and, thumbs ups going up. Deepa Agarwal, thanking you, and delighted that you enjoyed. Noor Jahan, she says. Deepika Kaura saying, wonderful questions, great conversation. Deepa again saying that it's important to understand the writer's bias, and Sham saying it's absolutely important to involve the boys. Obviously, so many people inspired by what you're saying, Devika. We're so delighted that I hope Funky Rainbow is the first one to do the promo on this series, really.
It
Uh,
is. It
we
is
are
actually.
hopelessly ambitious that way. Let me tell you that much, really. Right?
No, and thank you so much for allowing me to talk about my work here, and thank you everybody for your wonderful comments and your encouragement. It means a lot. And yes, Vidya, I mean you were definitely the first to feature Queen of Ice and the three books in this in this manner. So thank you so much to you and Funky Rainbow for this. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Devika's books, the Queen series, all up at Funky Rainbow's Bazaar. Log into www.funkyrainbow.com. Click on the tab that says Bazaar. The first drop down will say Queens and Kings, Devika's books. Besides these, her other books as well, Tales of Love and Adventure, the Rajatarangini, stories from the Rajatarangini, all of them up in our collection. Do consider picking them up if you've enjoyed this conversation with Devika. Thank you, Devika,
Thank
and
you so much.
we'll have you here with a South Indian queen very soon, I hope. And no, we're not pressurizing you, but
No, thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. That was such a lovely, lovely conversation with Devika Rangachari, always a writer, leaving you with so many thoughts. Joanne Saldana saying, thank you, Devika. Such a wonderful discussion and plenty of food for thought, too. It is really one that is, filled with so many questions that we need to ask ourselves. So do pick up the Queen series, all three of them up at Funky Rainbow. And, Muttama saying, thanking you, Devika, for all the research and all the effort that you put into your writing. All, I mean, available at Funky Rainbow. So please do consider picking them up. We'd be delighted if these books reached many houses, many schools, many libraries from us. I will, of course, go back to making a clutch of more recommendations. Shruti saying, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. It was very, very inspiring. I'm going to make a clutch of recommendations. As I said, never enough time to recommend all the books that exist in our collection on different themes. So you can always browse through that on our site, and specifically on the Bazaar tab, because the books that we have classified or put into these bazaars up there in a separate segment. I'm just going to run through a couple of more for you before we say hello to so many more friends who joined us. I think our friends on Instagram have come back now, and I do hope you managed to catch that conversation with Devika Rangachari on our YouTube or Facebook channels. This one is my next recommendation, called Jungu, the Baiga Princess, written by Vittal Rajan and published by Young Zuban. The illustrations here, again by Shrivi Kalyan. What is lovely is that this is the story of an Adivasi princess, a young Adivasi girl, and this is the story of a young boy called Sunil who is sent off to stay with his uncle Vish in Madhya Pradesh in a tiger reserve. That's where he befriends this young princess, a little Adivasi girl called Jungu, and is soon, introduced to their lives, to the lives of the Adivasis, and to some tough questions, about the survival of the Adivasis. If the tigers in that reserve are to survive, are the, Jungu, is Jungu and her family, are they going to have to move out from what is traditionally their home? It's such a great way, and it's a great story because there are poachers and there's all kind of excitement happening as well. But this story of a city boy and an Adivasi princess, you know telling us one of those excellent stories of respecting our natural environment, learning to live in harmony with the environment, and Jungu, this Baiga princess, opening our eyes to many such insights. Harshika Udasi saying, amazing effort and research, Devika. Long live the queen. Indeed, all the queens of Devika's books long live, basically. So this one, like I said, published by Young Zuban, priced at 250 rupees. We would recommend this for 10 plus year olds. I did refer to this excellent book that Devika has done, again published by Duckbill, called 10 Indian Monarchs, whose amazing stories you may not know, and really focusing on, interesting kings and queens, not just the very popular ones that we know of. And in this one, she has three queens, one of whom and really fascinating life. Ahilya Bai Holkar. There's Chand Bibi, there's Abbaka, of course, but she also, there's Didda, and, she's focusing on other, rulers like Ajatashatru, Bindusara, little known, kings, maybe not, the ones, the really prominent ones. Devika telling you absorbing stories of these monarchs whom you probably don't know that much about. We do recommend these books for middle readers. This book for middle readers as well. And Devika's wonderful style, giving your children fascinating insights into lesser known queens and kings. Again, published by Duckbill, priced at 200 rupees, and we'd say easily for 9, 10 plus year olds. The next recommendation that we have is this, wonderful book from Speaking Tiger called The Adventures of Prince Akbar. It's written by Flora Annie Steele, but, and this one has an introduction by none other than Ruskin Bond, which is the fictionalized story of a little boy who perhaps went on to become one of the greatest kings the world had ever seen. That is Akbar. Of course, long before he became the Akbar of our history textbooks, long before he became Akbar the Great, what was his story? What was his life, as a young boy? He was a brave young boy growing up alone while his father, Humayun, was away fighting various battles for Hindustan, for India, to set up the Mughal Empire, or to rather to sort of build the Mughal Empire in India. Now, the story goes into his favorite fierce black sheepdog, how he had a clever Snow White cat, and really going into the life of young Akbar. Of course, it's fiction, the fictionalized story of young Akbar's life. It's really, gives you some insights into, fictional insights into what perhaps, helped Akbar become a great ruler. And it is also an adventure, so readers 10 plus, or let's say 9 plus, very likely to enjoy this book, which has a lovely introduction by Ruskin Bond, writing about why he enjoyed reading this book as well. The Adventures of Prince Akbar, priced at 250 rupees, meant for 9 plus year olds, priced at 200, published by Speaking Tiger. Two wonderful books, two fantastic Greek tragedies by the playwright Sophocles. So there's Antigone, which is one of Sophocles' most famous plays, and there's Oedipus the King, both published by Tara, so handsomely published by Tara. I've just got to show you what the pages of this book look like, because it's absolutely printed on handcrafted paper, and screen printed on handmade paper, like a handcrafted book in every way, which is screen printed and done on handmade paper. You can see the stunning illustrations. Oedipus, of course, the story of the king of thieves, who tries to uncover a dreadful sin for which the gods are punishing his city. It's a compelling story. It's a compelling play by Sophocles. This one made available for young readers. We'd recommend this for 10 plus year olds, 11 plus year olds. all adults, simply because of how powerfully it's told and adapted for young readers, and also because of the stunning illustrations in it. Like I said, each of these books are handcrafted, so they are pricey at 800 rupees, but available at discounted prices at Funky Rainbow's Bazaar. I don't even have to tell you about Antigone, the pious, headstrong, and reckless in every way, breaking the law, defying her uncle, the king, in order to defend her dead brother. What fantastic books they are. Really, school libraries, even home libraries, you've just got to have these fantastic dramatic books, that are so beautifully handcrafted by Tara. Of course, the stories are retold in this case both by Sirish Rao and Geeta Wolf, and illustrated by the very talented Indra Pramit Roy. Both books priced at 800 rupees and available at special discounted prices at our bazaar. I am going to very quickly talk about this Teenage Diary series, and I know Devika, spoke about two books, by Subhadra Sengupta and Deepa Agarwal, but I'm going to pick one that came in very recently into this series that I so thoroughly enjoyed, which is the story, The Teenage Diary of Abbakka, the warrior queen of South India. Kavita Mandana, also another writer of historical fiction who does such a good job of telling her stories. Now, this one, picking the story of a queen from Ullal, from the Chautas of Ullal, basically, an area. Ullal is an area in coastal Karnataka. And, the thing is, the interesting thing about the Chauta dynasty was that many queens ruled this dynasty. And in fact, this Abbakka in the book is the story of Abbakka the third, because her own grandmother, Abbakka's own grandmother, also, who carried the name Rani Abbakka, was a fearsome warrior who fiercely defended her tiny kingdom. Abbakka, and in this teenage diary, Abbakka, as she's growing up, knows that she's going to rule over the kingdom of Ullal one day, and this very kingdom that was ruled by her grandmother Abbakka too, and her mother Rani Tirumala Devi. What happens, what goes on in the mind of a young teenager, and what adventures does she set out on, making a part of this wonderful series brought out by Speaking Tiger, the Teenage Diary series. But I'm particularly recommending, because Devika has recommended some of our favorites on in that series, both Subhadra Sengupta's book and Deepa Agarwal's, going to recommend Kavita Mandana's Abbakka to you. Also, because we've been talking about Rani Lakshmi Bai, this one in the series, again, another insight into the life of Rani Lakshmi Bai, written by Tanushri Podder, and this one telling you the story of Manikarnika, who was a poor priest's daughter and who grew up in the small town of Bittur in the court of the exiled Peshwa of Pune. How does she go on to become the legendary warrior queen of Jhansi? Really, this series a must for many, many young readers. We'd recommend this series for readers above the age of 12, because they are teenage diaries, and there's nothing in the book that a younger reader cannot read, really, but, some ideas of romance, some ideas of adventure, all of which I think our young people very, very, will very, very happily lap up, and giving you such a fantastic sense of all these queens. I'm just going to quickly show you the other books in the series. Do check them out on our website. There's Razia Sultan by Anisa Singh, The Diary of Jahannara by Subhadra Sengupta. There is, of course, The Teenage Diary of Noor Jahan by Deepa Agarwal, and there is The Teenage Diary of Jodh by Subhadra Sengupta. Sham, you want to show the other covers as well? You can. I think I sort of rushed past it very quickly. Oh, you did. Okay, sorry, I didn't, see that then. But the Teenage Diaries series, wonderful reads for 12-plus-year-olds. Each one priced at 2.99, and also available as a box set. School libraries, what are you waiting for? Really, I'm going to recommend just a small smattering of books. There is one by Ashok Banker that I particularly enjoyed reading. I think it's a series with many books. I think there are 14 if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 13. This one, Prince of Ayodhya, book one of the Ramayana by Ashok Banker. Of course, this is absolutely fiction, telling the story of Rama, the Prince of Ayodhya, and Ashok Banker, in his absolutely pacey style. His pace never ever flags. I mean, that's just something about Ashok Banker's books that make them so unputdownable, really. This one, it's the first one in the series. We only have this one, about the young, Prince Rama from the Ramayana. This one, is a read that I absolutely enjoyed. Like I said, it's lovely, it's spectacular in its scope, but it's also really pacey in its read. So you keep turning the pages to read one part of the story of the Prince of Ayodhya. Rupa Baliga, delighted to see you at the bazaar. Love Ashok Banker's books. Very interesting perspectives. Yes, all fictionalized perspectives, but lovely reads. This one published by a Penguin, priced at 399 rupees. Can't go off, but without talking of Sita's Ramayana. Of course, there's so many Sita books in our collection, but this one, published by Tara, done in graphic novel format, written by Samhita Arni and illustrated by Moina Chitrakar. Such a fantastic book, done in patua form. You can see that this patua art, really lifting the story of Sita to another level altogether. And Samhita Arni writing, the Ramayana from the point of view of a woman, from the point of view of Sita. It is a powerful meditation on how, women unwittingly, become victims to wars that are waged by men, to conquer various kingdoms. But in this retelling, in this interpretation, Samhita's interpretation of Sita's Ramayana, happily, Sita is not a patient victim of these events. She endures things with a great deal of fortitude, but at one point decides to challenge it. It's a fantastic book for young adults. We'd recommend it for 14 plus year olds, or maybe even 15 plus year olds. And like I said, these ages are always problematic. So, you should take a look at what level your children are, comfortable with. This one priced at, 550 rupees, a great, interpretation of the Ramayana. Three quick books for adults before we recommend our new arrivals, simply because we've loved them and enjoyed them so considerably. Mehel by Subhadra Sen Gupta. Who else, of course, writing for children and for adults, all about power and pageantry in the Mughal harem. It's such a, beautiful book that gives you insights into that citadel of the Mughal Empire, which was Mehel, or the harem. And Subhadra, being the fantastic writer of history, telling, picking out little known lives of remarkable women who have inhabited the Mahal, and in the process, introducing us to so many interesting women from Mughal history. It could be Babur's grandmother, Ehsan Daulat Begum, her name is Zebunisa, Salima Sultan, Zinatun Nisa. Really, this book, a fantastic read for adults. I can see Harshika Udasi tagging someone and asking her to come and see this. but this we recommend this for adults. But if you really think your 16 plus year olds are interested in history, this would certainly work for them. Priced at 599 rupees, published by Hachette. And I don't know what this fascination with the Mughal Empire is, but Daughters of the Sun by Ira Mukhoti, another wonderful book for adults, because it talks about empresses, queens, and begums of the Mughal Empire. If you watch some of her conversations on YouTube, such sparkling insights, so much of research, so well crafted, so lovingly told, the stories of women of the Mughal Empire. This one is also a fantastic read, and I really wonders how many books written about the great Mughals, which means so much scope to write about so many other dynasties and kingdoms in India, of the women who ruled India in different parts of the country. This one published by LF, priced at 699 rupees, and we recommend small, just 2 or 3 adult books, simply because so many of you write in saying, tell us about some good reads for adults as well, and the ones, some of which we've read ourselves, we recommend to you. The last one in this bazaar, a lovely book on Maharani Gayatri Devi, and this fascination with royalty. I remember reading the book so happily. It's the memoirs of the Maharani of Jaipur. I mean, I had friends who went to the Maharani Gayatri school in Jaipur, and somehow the stories that we've heard about her, her legendary, her acts of kindness, her acts of, doing things for the people in her kingdom, the elegance and the grace of her life made me pick up this, memoir to read. I so thoroughly enjoyed reading this one, so recommending it for it's a biography, it's an autobiography actually, it's a memoir, and this one of Maharani Gayatri Devi is indeed, and I can see Padma Baliga, it's a gem of a book. It really is, to understand the life of a queen, a very modern queen in Jaipur. This one published by Rupa, priced at 595 rupees. Like I said, many more recommendations, folks. Please do check our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click the tab that says Bazaar. The first drop down that will come up is Queens and Kings. Look at all the other books that we've put up there. We can only speak about 15-20 of them every single at every single bazaar. So if there are ones that interest you, do consider ordering them from Funky Rainbow. Sham, you want to do the new arrivals clip? Just quickly running through the new arrivals on our shelves, 1 or 2 that we've read, but the others we really haven't. The wonderfully talented writer Aditi Rao's Noon Chai and a Story, illustrated by Ghazal Qadri, a beautiful story set in Kashmir, a simple picture book meant for 5+ year olds, published by Tulika. More about it, it just came onto our shelves, so I'm sure we'll fit it into one of our bazaars going forward. But we love Aditi Rao's writing, and eagerly looking forward to reading Noon Chai and a Story. There's Michael Foreman's Noah and the Little Elephant, a tale of friendship and survival, published by HarperCollins. Again, supposed to be a heartwarming and poignant picture book about the issue, the ever important issue of conservation. And we do know that, Michael Foreman is such a picture book legend in our world. So this one, published, like I said, by HarperCollins UK, priced at 350 rupees. This one too, looks like a really interesting book, the A to Z of Indian cities from Ahmedabad to Zunheboto, 26 exciting cities, one for each letter of the alphabet. Get ready to go on a joyride of a journey across different cities or towns that the author has chosen. Written by Rati Malaya and illustrated by Bechen Nagri Studios. Loved the name of these studios. Got to read the book to find out what it's all about. This one published by HarperCollins, priced at 299 rupees. And of course, this collaboration between HarperCollins and Amar Chitra Katha, bringing out a clutch of books, comics that have, sort of been, I mean, books that have been adapted from the original Chitra Katha comics. So there are three that have come in: Tales of Wit and Wisdom, and there is funny folk tales adapted from the original Amar Chitra Katha comics, and Buddhist stories, each one meant for readers, meant for pretty young readers. Look at how large the text is. So I think it would absolutely work for children, 7 plus, 8 plus, depending on their reading levels. All three books, each one priced at 175 rupees, and also available as a pack, priced at 450 rupees. For huge fans of Amar Chitra Katha, this is probably a big one. I mean, this is probably a good one to read. I'm going to say hi to a couple of more guests who joined us. Stories from Stone, such a pleasure to see you. Just telling my tales. Tejashri, how lovely to see you. I wonder, are you the Tejashri who designed the wonderful covers of the Queen series? If yes, we've got to give a loud shout out to you, because these are some of the most spectacular books in the Indian children's context, in the Indian children's publishing context, and they stand out so remarkably on our bookshelves. Queen of Ice, Queen of Earth, and Queen of Fire. So if you are the same Tejashri, a big shout out, going out to you for the wonderful design and the wonderful art. Rashmi Sanappa Sagarwal, Moon Mitra, Eureka Children's Books, Swati and Venki, so lovely that you join us at the bazaar whenever you can. We love the work that indies like you do to reach children's books here, there, everywhere, and delighted to collaborate with you in any way possible to make sure more books go out into more houses and more schools. Maja Girl, Sneha, Deepika R. Kaura, Deepa Agarwal, and Rupa Baliga. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at our Queens and Kings Bazaar. Have a wonderful weekend, and remember, there's nothing quite like the feeling of being your own queen or king. We'll see you next week with another bazaar. Till then, bye bye.